What up? Yeah, whenever that happens, just go over here to today's work. Jen just went over here and you no big whoop. The only thing, they're talking like how many people out there, things like that. All those little tiny islands at the lesser Antilles and all that sort of stuff. Let's do the major ones.
How many are there?
26. Yeah. Hey, no problem. Alrighty. So, I believe where last we left off, we were right about here. Does that sound about right to you? About right? So we're talking about a diverse biosphere. Can someone remind me, what is a biosphere? Yeah.
Like animals and everything.
All living things, plants, animals, all of the above. It's got one of the most diverse. Why?
Because the rainforest is not.
Yeah. There's really only two seasons you see in the rainforest, wet and dry. Basically the same as we see in sub-Saharan Africa. So that means that there's a constant concentration of nutrients in this area, so animals really don't have to search as much for food, and basically there's not as many pressures on extinction on them. Furthermore, the biggest pressure of extinction in the world, bar none, is us. And we don't really go there. Not so much, not on mass. It's too dense and just we don't want to be there. But here's a few other examples of some climates in question. Now don't worry about writing this down, but I just wanted to kind of point your attention to them. So the Amazon Basin, the largest land mass in South America, the largest physical feature, contains the Amazon rainforest, of course. But there's others as well. If you look on the edges, for instance, we've got what we call tropical wet-dry, again referring to these two seasons, wet cycle, dry cycle. Now, another kind of interesting point is the effects that highlands have on the land. We talked yesterday about this phenomenon of desertification, specifically the rain shadow effect. You guys remember, what is the rain shadow effect?
Is that what you said about how the rain hits the one side and the other side doesn't get any?
Yeah, does that ring a bell to everybody? How it hits the mountain and one side is really green, but the other side is dead. The Atacama Desert's the deadest place on earth. Nothing's alive there, not even bacteria. Yeah.
Okay, well, I saw that happen when I was on vacation a couple years ago. And it was one, like, we were on one, like, the restaurant was here, but the ocean was here. But, like, the ocean was right here.
Yeah,
but
sure.
there's rain coming down here, not.
Yeah. It's pretty cool, actually. Although it's kind of weird to think of the physical landmass affecting it that much. But yeah, it's absolutely true. It's pretty neat. Here's a few other examples of various landforms and rather climates that we see. For instance, highlands we talked about. What's this big mountain chain right here?
The Andes.
Yeah, sure. And then we also have the Sierra Madres right here, the oriental facing towards the Orient, towards Asia, and the Occidental on the other side. We also have marine west coast. That's generally the type of climate you see in Europe. It's the most common climate in Europe, actually. And, well, that's not technically true. Technically, it's continental, but on the west coast it is. And so think of like, northern France, England. So it's kind of chilly. And again, we have to understand that due to latitude, South America is kind of big. You got a lot of different climates. But also, if you go north of that, you have Mediterranean, which is the climate we, of course, find in the Mediterranean Sea. And what's neat about that is, if you think of Mediterranean cuisine, food, name some Mediterranean countries for me. Some countries found here in the Mediterranean Sea. Anybody? Greece is one, sure. Yeah. Italy, yeah.
Where is the sea?
Yeah.
Right here.
Okay.
France, Spain, sure. Turkey. Do you guys know what all these various cuisines have in common?
Bread.
The only problem with that is that's every cuisine in the world. If you think about it, bread is actually one of the most common food items. It just changes from place to place. Pretzels are bread, But one thing that's very common, as you point out, is what do you put bread in? What do you dip it in? If you go to one of those fancy things. Well, you can, sure. I was actually getting it olive oil, but yeah, I mean, all kinds of things. Oh, yeah. Yeah, like Olive Garden. We're not going to the Olive Garden. Oh, we're not going to the Olive Garden. Oh, Mr. Fancy wants to go to the Red Lobster. Anyways. Anybody? Big Bang Theory. Anyways, no, but if you look at a lot of different elements in the cuisine, you have different ingredients that only really grow in the Mediterranean. They're really well suited for that, such as olives. But also wine. Wine's a big deal in this area of the world. I mean, think of the wine-producing countries in Europe. You're talking Portugal, Spain, France, and Italy. Like, those are the main ones. Again, Mediterranean. Well, Chile, which has this Mediterranean climate on the west coast, has been becoming a wine country in the past few years. Like, if you look at the #1 types of wineries that are up and coming in the world, they're all in Chile. The other thing to consider is, if you think of the United States, you think of wine country. We're talking California. Guess what type of climate they have there? Mediterranean. So again, the human-environment interaction, the environment shapes the human response. It's pretty cool. But the other thing to consider how climate is affected is it's more than just latitude. There's also the issue of elevation. So we have 4 distinct climate zones within the Andes and within the highlands of South America. Now this is excluding, like, if we go farther south where these grasslands like Argentina, which is utilized extensively for beef production. But we're talking all over here. And one thing we're going to see is that certain crops are grown in certain areas because that's just what grows really well there. Another thing I'd like to point out is there's a lot of distinct and important crops which originate in Latin America. Now, the first area we're talking about is La Tierra Caliente, which can anyone tell me what that means, do you think? Anyone studying Spanish?
Something hot.
All right, so caliente is hot, very good. Tierra comes from the Latin word terra. You guys know terra? T-E-R-R-A, yeah. Land, yeah, earth, sure. The hot earth, or hot land, sure. In fact, one thing I think is very cool, going back to the Mediterranean Sea, of course, terra is earth, medi, middle. The sea in the middle of the earth. You see, the Greeks and the Romans thought this was the entire world right here. They basically knew Europe and Africa and then this area of the Middle East. That's it. So in their viewpoint, the world was this area of land and there's one ocean in the middle of it connecting it. So this is the sea that's in the middle of the earth. That's where it comes from. Also very useful if you can remember that, you can spell it perfectly every time. Go on, Sarah.
Is that why people think or thought that the earth is flat?
Well, that's actually a misconception. Very few people did by Columbus's time. Most everyone knew that it was round. The big problem that they had with Columbus's voyage was that, well, basically Columbus underestimated how big the earth was. He thought it wouldn't take him that long. So people were telling him, no, the earth is way bigger. You're never going to make it. Because, again, there wasn't enough food to make it all the way to China from their calculations. And, to be honest, they were right. He just happened to get lucky. So that's why we say, like, he just kind of ran into North. He did. And then he just kind of bumped into it. And he was very confused. That's why we call Native Americans Indians. You know, they're not Indians at all. That's okay. So, what grows here? Generally speaking, tropical fruits. If you think of a tropical fruit, this is where we're going to grow it. Bananas, papayas, mangoes, all kinds of things like that. Also sugar. Sugar grows very, very well here. Now, sugar does not originate in this area of the world. It is not indigenous to Latin America. It's actually from, may I know where?
Where sugar?
Yeah, sugar cane specifically.
The Aztecs.
It's not indigenous. So it's from somewhere else.
China?
Close. Other way. It's from India. India. Remember how we talked about the spice trade to India? Sugar is the spice. Sugar is the spice. That's what we want. It's worth. Well, let me put you this way. There's two main spices that people are kind of going gaga for, like literally worth more than gold. Pepper is number one. Pepper was the most expensive thing you could. I mean, it was incredibly dear. Then there's sugar. Sugar was so expensive it was put under lock and key. Yeah. There was only one key, and it was held by the lady of the household. You know, we're talking if you can afford sugar, you've got a nice house. It was actually, as stupid as this is, it wasn't uncommon to use sugar as a status symbol. So if like you want to impress people, you invite them over for dinner, and you have a big old thing of sugar right in the middle. But oh, just want a little bit of sugar? Put some sugar on that. It's fish. Yeah, put some sugar on it. Yeah. It's like I don't even care. You know, I whatever. I can spend money. I don't care. Which is like that's kind of dumb. But think about it. We do the same thing. We show off by putting really shiny rocks on our bodies. You know what I mean? Diamonds are just shiny rocks. You know, they're not even rare. If you really look at it, they're kind of all over the place. It's just we've convinced ourselves they're expensive. They're not really. Yeah.
So why is sugar not expensive?
Because mass production. It's a great question. Sugar is incredibly labor intensive to make. Not just the growing process and harvesting it, but whenever you actually harvest sugar cane, it's a reed, just like the name implies. So you have to cut that down, and you have to filter it out, and there's all these different byproducts in it, like molasses is a byproduct of sugar. So when you buy sugar, that's a pound of sugar, things like that, that's been processed way, 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 way down from where the original process is. In fact, you can actually even buy what's called raw sugar that still has the molasses in it. And then you have different types of brown sugar and things like that. So basically, we, through automation, using machines and other new techniques, can mass produce it. It doesn't take near as much effort to produce. And whenever that happens, things get cheaper. The same thing applies to cars. Like Henry Ford, for instance, the thing that he really did wasn't, he never invented the car. Like people say it all the time, it was wrong. He didn't invent the car. What he did is he mass-produced it. He used the assembly line, he used factories in order to make it less expensive for him to make them. So that meant he could charge people less, and that meant more people could afford it, and that really started the sort of car revolution in the Americas. So, stuff like that. It's a great question, yeah.
Wasn't salt really expensive too?
Not salt, no, not so much. Salt was actually pretty easy to get a hold of. If you think about it, you can take salt water, boil the water out, and bam, you got salt. Now, you're probably thinking about in India, at one point in the 1900s, well, not 1900s, excuse me, the late 1800s. Wait, no, early 1900s, that was our first time. There was Great Britain controlled India, and essentially they forced the Indians to buy it from Britain, which meant it had to be exported, which meant that it was a lot more expensive than like getting it from the sea. So like Gandhi actually ended up having this big protest, and now we're just going to get sea salt and blah, blah, blah. So that's probably what you're thinking of. So in specific incidents, you're right, but for the most part in history, not so much. But going back to sugar, okay, again, look at latitude. It originates in India. Perfect area for growing it. The other thing is, we're not just using sugar for sugar's sake. You can make booze out of it. And indeed, you guys know what the #1 production of the American colonies was at the time of the American Revolution? Rum, actually, which is made from sugar. And there you are. So sugar is not indigenous, but this next one is cacao. You guys know what that is? Yeah, it's chocolate. Chocolate, again, though, needs to be processed because this is actually what a cocoa pod looks like. This is the cocoa tree. If you were to crack that sucker open, you're going to have a whole bunch of little white beans, which if you were to eat one are actually kind of sweet and have a sort of mellow kind of chocolatey taste. They're okay, but they're not really that great. To get what we think of as chocolate, you actually have to take these beans and lay them out in the sun and let them ferment. You guys know what fermentation is? Okay. So then that converts it into a liqueur, which you can process that. And you can also get chocolate liqueur, you can get cocoa powder and cocoa butter. Chocolate, like bars, is actually a mix of those ingredients in different percentages. So there's a little bit of chemistry going into that, which is why you can have like a cocoa heavy chocolate bar that's very bitter almost. Like pure cocoa powder tastes almost like coffee grounds. That's really, really bitter. Some people like that flavoring, but you know, it's a taste thing, I
I
suppose.
want to see a video of like how
Oh, you can find it on YouTube. It's pretty fascinating. Yeah, you can find everything on YouTube. Seriously, yeah. Anyways, but cacao is one of these types of things that is indigenous, and it's going to spread like wildfire. It is going to be heavily consumed by Europeans. Although the whole idea of like hot cocoa, what we think of, is based upon a drink called chocolate, which is an Aztec invention. Chocolate, yeah. Yeah. The Aztec language is kind of interesting how the sounds work. I'm not fluent by any means, shape, or word, but I know how to pronounce a few of the words, like atlatl and quetzalcoatl and things like that.
what's that? What are those things?
That latl is a weapon. Specifically, it's a stick that lengthens the reach of your arm so you can throw a spear. And the idea was it was a projectile weapon. So it wasn't a bow and arrow exactly, but you would fit it on the back of a spear that had feathers on it, so like a giant arrow. And this would basically almost act like you had a 4-foot-long arm and allow you to throw these things like crazy distances. And Quetzalcoatl was the chief god. It was a feathered serpent kind of thing. So, yeah, that's the extent of my Aztec. But anyways, back to chocolatl. It was a drink made with corn, cocoa, and hot peppers. And apparently it was utterly delicious because Hernando Cortez was served, and he was like, man, we got to bring this back to Europe. And they did, and it spread like wildfire. And they could actually break it in into these little like cakes type thing, and you could cut that up and make a drink out of it. You can actually still buy those cakes today at different stores. A lot of times you'll find them in like Mexican grocery stores, things like that. Anyways, moving on. So, La Tierra Templada, this temperate lands. Generally, the things you find here are food crops. Coffee, that's weird. We don't think of that as being a food crop, but consider this. Water for much of history is dangerous. Heck, it's still dangerous today for most of the world, the developing world anyways. If you think about it, the idea that you can go get clean water from a wall is really bizarre, strange, and is a pretty great privilege. This is one thing I think is fascinating. If you look at kings and queens throughout history, it's easy for us to be envious of them, all their wealth and power and all this sort of stuff. But think about what their wealth and power can buy. Oh, I can have servants who can go get me water that's boiled so I can have a hot bath every day. So can you. I can have food from anywhere around the world. So can you. I can afford to pay exorbitant fees for fruits from all over across the world. You can do that, but you can buy them cheaper. You can get them any season, and you can get them at Myers. You know? I mean, seriously, you live better than monarchs 100 years ago. You will most likely live longer than monarchs 100 years ago. How crazy is that? That's pretty cool. Anyways, but coffee is a food crop because it is widely consumed, even today. And the thing we have to understand is it was necessary for a lot of people because, again, water is not trustworthy. So you have to do something with it to make it basically drinkable. What is that? What do you have to do to water to make it drinkable? Sure. And what do you have to do to water to make coffee? Yeah, there you go. So, widely consumed. Still is today. I mean, obviously, the world is infatuated with coffee. Again, not indigenous to Latin America. That originated from the Middle East, specifically the area around Iraq. Corn, however, does come from this area of the world. And corn is one of the most important food crops ever in the history of the world. I mean, seriously, look on the back of products and see how much of everything has corn in it, whether it be corn syrup or any of its derivatives. Not to mention, it's just plain delicious. I mean, come on.
No, I love corn.
Mm. Corn chips is nothing else. Yeah, cornbread. True story. Hey, corn fritters are where it's at. What? Oh, I'll get that in a second. Corn fritter is basically like a hush puppy, but it's made with corn. No. Basically, it's deep fried cornbread.
That would be so great.
I tell you, honestly, that's Southern cooking for you right there. How can we add more terrible things to this? Let's fry it in butter. You know? What sound does the machine gun make? Butter, butter, butter. That's, someone was asking, what is that? That is cassava. It is actually a delicacy throughout Latin America. It is also a unique plant, both for its texture and one other unique property. You see, it's poisonous. If you were to harvest a raw cassava and eat it, you would probably die. Not 100% guaranteed. People have eaten it and survived. You're not going to be happy. You'll be having.
Why would people eat it?
That's a great question. That is a great question. And the simple factor is you can treat it so that it's not poisonous.
Well, it's supposed to be delicious or something?
Yeah, it is, allegedly. The weird thing is the consistency I've heard read for, it's like halfway between a potato and a banana, which is an odd thing. It's a bit like a plantain, I suppose. But the thing is, like, why would they eat it? Because it was a starch. It was necessary for life. Starches are good. You want starches in your diet, especially if you're a subsistence type of lifestyle. This isn't talking like I have enough food to get fat. This is you might have enough food to stave off starvation. So you want as many calories as you can. Consider this also. How much does the average person need a day? How many calories do we need to just live? On average. Yeah.
Well, you mean like adding it all up, or
Mhm.
just?
Per day.
Well, if you multiply your weight by your, I don't know, something, you get the total amount.
Okay. Give me average though.
So probably like 1,000.
More than that.
2,000, yeah.
Well, it's about 1,500 for a lady and about 2,000 for a dude, on average. Of course, that varies depending on the situation, but that's about what you expect. So, for instance, the chili cheese fries they have at TGI Fridays? Basically that.
McDonald's.
That's about 1,200 calories or so. It's insane. But anyway, this is kind of what you expect. The average amount of calories that someone working, like on a farm this time, they need about 4,000 to 5,000 calories a day. Lumberjacks out in the Yukon Territory in Canada, they eat 6,000 to 8,000 per day. We're talking like Olympic athletes. This is just to maintain normal function. I'm not talking like they need this to like put on. No. This is what they need every day just to like do their job. There's a reason why when we hear about like lumberjack food, it's like covered in sawmill gravy. But I mean, seriously, think about this. We're going to take the meat juices and we're going to cook them in flour and butter.
That's not healthy.
I mean, seriously, listen to the diet that Michael Phelps, the Olympic swimmer, what he would eat. It's like, it's not like, man, it's like, that's disgusting. The dude had to eat like a dozen eggs for breakfast every day. And this would be with a loaf of bread covered in butter. So,
It sounds like literally my perfect.
well, I have a solution for you. Start swimming at least 12 hours a day, and you will be in hot heaven. I know, right? I mean, I don't know. She really looks like a dude. I mean, I can't think of any female Olympian swimmers that don't know. There you go.
Josh Anderson had to eat like chicken like every single day. He had to start eating like all like protein foods to get pregnant.
He looks a lot tougher.
Which one's that?
Josh, he's like PETA.
No, which dude is that?
Josh Anderson.
PETA.
Oh, okay, gotcha. I'm like, the character, please. Thank you. Gotcha. I have no idea. I haven't seen that one yet. I've seen all the other ones, and we were going to see that, but it was between that and the Hobbit. We saw the Hobbit.
Wait, so you saw Mockingjay and then the Hunger Games, but you didn't see Catching Fire?
Right, it's on our to-do list. We have 2 kids under 4. We maybe get to see a movie a year, if we're lucky. It just happens to be
Out of
now.
order. How Legoland? Whatever it's called.
No, we've seen the first 2 Hunger Games movies, but we haven't seen,
Yeah, Mockingjay.
yeah, we haven't seen
I
Mockingjay.
thought you said that you watched the first and the third, but not the second.
No,
You said
I
Catching
was
Fire.
confused.
Catching fires.
Yeah, okay, fair enough.
I
My brain's not working real well, so I've been up for, for a crazy amount of time. Kiddo woke up in the morning. But anyways. So cassava is indigenous to this region. Aren't you glad we're recording this for posterity?
People probably enjoy our conversation every day.
Well, the funny thing is we're actually part of a wider YouTube channel that's history education, so probably someone is listening and going, "What?" We're talking about you, Stephen.
Oh, yeah.
Just gave somebody a heart attack. They'll be listening and be like, ah!
Everyone used to
We're coming for you. We're gonna make you take us to go see Hunger Games movies. And possibly to eat lots of things with butter. Anyway, let's hear up Fria, the cold lands. What grows here? Well, again, this is kind of more on a European scale, so European crops like barley and wheat. However, we also have the most important crop food item ever in the history of all the world. The most important crop ever. Potatoes. Let's talk about potatoes.
They're awesome.
All right, first of all, let's talk about nutrition. Are potatoes good for you?
No.
Absolutely, yes, they are.
Yeah.
Here's bear with me on this. Again, from the standpoint of I'm not going to eat a pound at a sitting. It's not a matter of, because this is how great our society is, right? Think about this. We have so much food that we can get fat. That's amazing. So much of history is people starving to death. Seriously, that is average. And by the way, people still starve to death.
But yeah, like now our society, it's like all this stuff is so bad for you.
But- And the thing is, what does that mean, bad for you? It means that you've consumed too much of it. To be perfect, unless you're talking about like, well, I'm going to drink some gasoline.
What if you had a meal at McDonald's? What's a
True. Well, actually, a guy did that and lost 30 pounds. He ate nothing but McDonald's. You see, he was doing a science experiment. He was proving it has nothing to do with what you're eating. It's the calorie intake and things like that, as well as basic nutrition, vitamins, things like that. Here's one of the great things about potatoes, right? So we talk about complete meals. That means they have all the vitamins and minerals you need to survive, right? Potatoes have that. If you add one other ingredient, dairy.
Is butter dairy?
Butter. Right. Mashed potatoes and butter, you could theoretically eat nothing but that and survive. I don't think you want to do it, but you could. But again, here's the thing is, I'll do it for a while, and here's the thing is, what can't you do with a potato?
You can make fries, you can
Well, imagine put them in soup, everything, right? And here's the thing is, when we talk about subsistence agriculture, like you need to plant enough food to survive, right? Because here's the thing is, you have to understand, wrap our heads around in terms of a farm at this point in history, well, not this point in history, obviously, but through much of history is, you're living on a farm, right? Whatever food you need to survive on must be provided by your farm, because you're not going to get food anywhere else. If you fail to plant something, you go without. If the only crop that comes in is corn, you're eating corn for every meal until you can plant again. So you have to plan ahead, right? Now, you're going to want to maximize the amount of food you can get out. That's common sense. Obviously, that means more food for you to live off of, but it also means if you have extra, you can sell it for money, and you can use that to maybe buy a cow or something, right? You can do all kinds of crazy stuff with money, right? So we want crops that take very well, provide a lot of nutrition, it's efficient, bang for your buck sort of foods. Potatoes are way up there. Let's analyze it point by point. First of all, potatoes are stupid easy to plant. You basically get a bunch of soil, put it in a mound, and shove in the seeds. They're seed potatoes. Actually, potatoes you bury, and that's it. And then they grow under the ground. To put into perspective, my grandfather, who used to live on a farm, this was he lives in the suburbs of Louisville, so it doesn't really count. He's an avid gardener. He has a hate relationship with the local squirrels. Seriously, he has like no squirrel signs all over his property. It's hilarious. Anyways, so his thing is gardening. It's his hobby. And this one time he had these potatoes that started to go to seed, just randomly. So he peeled them like you do, and ate the potatoes, and was like, I'll take these and I'll bury them in the garden. The skins, right? So he buries those out in in his garden. Bigger potatoes. Just the skins. Not very many. Wasn't very good seeding potatoes, but they did work. He was kind of like, Second point, where do they grow? Which means they are resistant to a lot of other pests, birds, insects, fungus. They are hardy plants. They can grow basically anywhere, any climate, any soil. They are fantastic. However, there are instances of them going bad. The great potato famine. See, here's the thing is, they were so proliferate, they became the poor person's food, especially in a lot of poor countries like Ireland, that basically that's what they grew. That's what they had, potatoes. And they came with all these recipes on how to use potatoes and eat them and So when a fungus hit Ireland, it actually destroyed the potato crop for 4 years in a row. It caused massive starvation. 1 million people died in 1 year in Ireland due to the potato famine. Another million in that same year fled the country. So 2 million people from that country gone. A lot of them came to the United States.
How many people live, like an estimate of how many live?
Well, that's a good question because, and again, with the introduction of potatoes, the population goes up 70 million in Europe. Up to 240 million in Europe. That's staggering numbers. Now, that's not the only reason. I mean, that would be fallacious to say that that's the only reason. But potatoes had a major hand in it. The nutrition they provide, a lot of people would fight off diseases that normally they couldn't, and a lot of people live longer. So when I say it was the most important crop in the history of the world, that's why.
How they get rid of the fungus?
I don't know. That's a good question. I couldn't answer that. I've never actually looked that part up, to be honest. I think they developed something to fight it off, but I can't be for sure. Yeah.
I can do that.
Sure. So the last is La Tierra Helada, basically the frozen land. It's not really suitable for the growing of much of anything, to be perfectly honest. It's basically beyond the timber line. This is an area where trees can't even grow. There's not enough nutrients, too thin air, all these different types of things. However, we do have a lot of kind of like tough grasses things that can grow up there. So does that mean we can't use it for anything? No, of course we can use it for something. We can herd animals. Animals can eat the grass, we can eat the animals. Thus beginning usage of it for sheep and llamas. By the way, you guys know llamas?
Yeah.
You guys know what family they belong to, what other animal they're incredibly similar to? Alpacas are a type of llama. But other than that,
Animals?
camels. Yeah, they're South American camels. Like guanacos. I think it's cool. They're big furry camels, essentially. And they have really soft fur, at least some of them do.
Somebody said like on a spit then.
Yeah, they actually, when you look at them, you're like, yeah, that's a camel. That's what that is. So anyways, but the thing we also have to understand is there's a relationship between all these different people. The herdsmen having all these animals would then sell animal products to the farmers who would then sell them grains and things they couldn't grow themselves. So there's this kind of relationship between the various mountain peoples. We think of different communities all throughout. Now, historically speaking, herders tend to also be aggressors. They're kind of tough people. They're living out. They have to fight with predators and they have to hunt and things like that. So they tend to have weapons training, usually bows and arrows, that sort of thing. So they tend to make pretty good warriors. Not so much in South America, per se, but around the world for sure. So we see this relationship. Not to mention the fact that herders are eating a lot of protein that leads to muscle build, as we pointed out earlier. So talking about methods of agriculture, there's two main ones you need to know: slash and burn farming and terrace farming. Slash and burn farming is basically where you clear part of the forest, burn everything that you cut down, and then use those ashes as fertilizer. Now, the reason you do this in the rainforests is because there's a big problem with the rain, essentially, sucking all the nutrients out of the soil. This process is called leaching. Basically, the water washes away all the nutrients. And so, basically, you have to use something to fertilize land, the ashes of the trees and other vegetation. However, this leads to deforestation. The reason it leads to deforestation is simple. Once you cut down all the trees, you have no more fertilizer. And so eventually all the nutrients are washed out of your land, so you have to repeat the cycle again and again and again. So the number one cause of deforestation in South America is agriculture. The other alternative is to use chemical fertilizers. However, water is what is moving these nutrients out. So basically, you're introducing chemicals to the water table, which gets into people's drinking water, which is bad. It's also bad for other animals living in the rainforest. So it is a major problem. The other issue of farming, or the other method, I should say, is terrace farming. I'll show you a picture of that here in just a second. But suffice it to say, agriculture remains one of the most significant forms of economic activity in Latin America. If we were to break it down to the top three, we would have agriculture with manufacturing and tourism. Manufacturing, especially in Mexico and in certain other countries, because of their proximity to the United States. Now, any questions on this? We good on this? I realize now I'm kind of moving a little fast, so I want to give you guys a second. I'll show you a picture here in a second. It's easier for me to show you a picture and then talk about it than it is for me to try to describe it. So give me just a second and I'll show you what I mean. But I will say this, is the production of tropical fruits and things like that, as well as other cash crops, dominate South America. They're the number one exporter of coffee, for instance. Odds are very, very good. If you had a cup of coffee this morning, it came from a South American or Central American country. Good. I almost wipe out that thing at least once a day.
What is the Sierra Colada?
Frozen. You guys know what the word for ice cream is in Spanish? Oh. It's a good way of remembering it. Slash and burn farming. Again, we're going to talk about this more in detail later about the usage of the rainforest, because here's the problem. It'd be nice if we could say, well, just no one use the rainforest, just let it be. However, that's basically saying don't have an economy. It's not going to happen. So what we're talking about is intelligent usage of natural resources. That's what we have to concentrate on. We'll talk about that more next week, though. This is terrace farming. Spot on. This is the city of Machu Picchu. Basically, they would cut out these indentations and then farm on the flat parts. What's cool is the size, because this just looks like steps. It's like, okay, it looks kind of big, but how big is it? Those are people standing on it. It's big. Yeah, put that in the scale, right? So it's pretty cool, yeah?
Yeah. Wait, so what are those?
They're basically step-like indentations. And the reason you do that is it gives you a flat surface to farm, and it gives the plant something to grab hold of. So it's just an efficient way of farming. All right, I only got 2 minutes. I really don't think I can go farther than this, so we'll finish this next section up tomorrow. However, I do want you guys to bring devices tomorrow. iPad, phone, whatever. If you want to use one of my iPads, be my guest, it's fine. You will not need your textbooks. You won't really need your notebooks either. You will need a loose leaf sheet of paper. So if you want to bring your notebooks and tear one out there, that's fine. But you will be turning it in, so make certain that you can hand it in. Fair enough? That's it for today.
Well, it's all folks down in